Good. Very warm welcome to everybody. And a warm welcome to Edy Nathan. First time here on our birth journey. And Edie is going to be presenting a course on motherhood and the unforeseen bind of loss of identity, which is what she's going to be talking about this evening as well. Um, and so that course starts on the 1st of February. So that's a Thursday, 1st, 8th, and 15th of February at 7 p.m. So three parts to this wonderful course. And Edie is a very well-known presenter, therapist, author, public speaker on the subject of grief. And she is also a licensed sex therapist, hypnotherapist, and certified EMDR practitioner with more than 20 years of experience. And so she's going to be talking about the loss of identity that a mother might experience, which is a sort of a subject that perhaps is not often discussed, but I think incredibly important to kind of really get out in the open and talk about. So, which is what we're doing tonight. So, welcome, Edie. Thank you for being here. Thank you.
Oh, it's wonderful to be here and to talk about something that's just dear to my heart, which is the loss of personal identity.
Yeah, cool. All right, so we got a few questions we're going to run through with you, if that's all right.
Perfect. Yeah.
And so first off, statistically, between about 10 and 20% of new mothers develop postnatal depression or forms of anxiety. And could be lots of reasons for that, like hormonal changes, sleep problems, overwhelming sense of responsibility, etc. And you've discovered a hardly ever considered aspect of this problem, which is you call about the loss of identity. So first off, could you just explain what you mean by that term, loss of
Mhm.
identity?
Sure. So we we have a personal identity. It begins really from birth, maybe, and there are some people who would argue it really begins in utero.
Mm,
And so it's not that I'm going to say one thing or another, whatever you believe is perfectly fine. But that personal identity is how one thinks of oneself. One comes into one's own beliefs about who they are in the world and how they function in the world and you know how they think about emotions, how they think about their physicality, how they think about their own thinking process. And even as an infant, where there's testing that is done, the first lie comes around a year and a half to 2 years, and we're testing all of the different, boundaries of that parental unit, whatever that unit is. And personal identity also gets informed then. What can I get away with? What can't I get away with? How do I process? How do I work around something? And so one's personal identity and social identity, where do you fit in the world in terms of your socialization, really starts very, very early on. And I believe that the personal identity gets formed and continues to form, just like we've learned about the brain, like those neural pathways continue to get formed past 20, past 25, into our 30s, 40s, 50s, and on. So the personal identity and the loss of the personal identity um, can happen in ways that we don't expect. And though when we talk about in the United States, we call it PPD, which is, when a mother is diagnosed with that, so often, now there's a medication, and they're not really looking often at the other losses that are occurring. And those other losses are just so important to look at,
mm,
because the loss of personal identity, and the stories that are given to new mothers, and the story is, isn't this exciting, isn't this wonderful? And it is, and
mm,
it's delicious in all of those right ways. And yet no one is honest enough at times, and I'm not saying this is across the board, because sometimes there is honesty, like it's hard and you're
mm,
going to be tired and you're not going to have the resilience, And you're not going to know what to do with this child that is hanging on to you. And it's like, you want my breast one more time? What do you mean you want my breast one more time? I want my breast to come back to me.
Mm,
And frankly, and I speak very frankly, I want my vagina back. I want these body parts to come back to me. And then there's the loss of who am I? And these are all parts of personal identity.
mm, absolutely. So, how did you come to this realization that this transition from, say, being a professional to a mum can have this such a profound effect? Because it also affects, I think, both partners. I was talking to my partner just now about it. How was it for me? But I mean, it's very different from a man, obviously. Yeah. So how did you come to that kind of realization around all this material?
My work around grief began with loss of a partner, loss of a loved one,
Mm,
loss of children, just those losses that has to do with, the death of a loved one.
mm,
The more I worked, I was seeing, really losses and grief is everywhere. And we are dealing with the conversation around grief right now. And it's changed really, I think, since the pandemic a lot, but even pre-pandemic, that grief and loss was being taken into the world as what are the losses that we are experiencing, not just from the loss of a loved one, but the
mm,
losses that we incur. Being a sex therapist, I began to see that in my office, dealing with trauma, dealing with grief, and dealing a lot with sexual trauma, that there was something that I've actually founded called the sexual grief effect, and that sexual grief effect was a natural response to a sexually traumatic um, predatory event or developmental experience that leaves one feeling as if they've been held hostage. And I started to think, okay, so what developmental examples where are felt as if, are responded to in such a way, oh my God, this is taking hold of me and I cannot let go. And
mm,
I work with a fair amount of mothers and new mothers, helping them work through and manage their sense of loss, loss of identity. And then I realized, my gosh, this is grief.
mm,
And this is not just a hormonal piece. This is a developmental piece. There's been an interruption, and that interruption of one's trajectory and who they thought they were and the kind of mother they thought they were going to be. And there's no one to talk to about this. That's how it feels.
mm,
As if I am imprisoned. I can't really talk about the fact that sometimes I hate this role. Sometimes I don't know what to do or even how to talk about it or have words about the losses that I feel, even though I love this child and I love being a mother, and sometimes I don't.
mm,
And my partner has now not only lost me because I'm this mom, but has lost me because I'm lost and I'm not standing in my shoes and in my groundedness, perhaps in the way that they knew me to be. So now they've lost me, and there is a loss that happens when the mother has that love affair with their baby and the
mm,
partner doesn't know what to do or what position to take within the family system, because the system has changed, especially first child, but also second and third.
mm,
So there is that sense of, oh my gosh, who am I? And so as the partner is going through who am I, and the mother is going through who am I, um, it's fraught with difficulties that are often unspoken, hidden. And I talk about the sexual grief effect in ways that people are kind of like stuck in a labyrinth and they
mm,
don't know how to get out, and they're trying to move around, and they're trying to find their center, and they're also trying to find, wait, let me out of here.
mm, mm,
So, yeah.
mm. Thank you. And I know you in some of your work you also use this term new mother conundrum. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Mm. So the new mother conundrum is uh, it goes to this loss of self, expectation of self,
Mm.
idealized role that one thinks they will be in as a mother, and yet what they thought, what 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 a woman believes she will be, and who she ultimately is in that role is a conundrum. It is a it's my it's it's mind numbing, and it creates like a almost like a spaghetti brain
Mm.
where they're not thinking straight. Now that is hormones, but that's also this loss of self. And the
Yeah.
conundrum is, where do I fit in? And where do I belong? And who am I now?
Yeah.
And can I be this good mother that I have idealized myself? I'm going to be a better mother than my mother was.
Mm. Yeah. Thank you. Um, I know this is something you're going to be covering, I think, in the course, this whole thing about sexual grief, but could you just talk a little bit about that now as well?
Certainly, yeah. I think I jumped the gun.
No, that's okay. You did touch on
So
it a bit earlier. That's fine.
I'm
Could you
so
say a
I'm
bit
so
more about it?
excited by
That's fine.
it that I can't seem to help myself.
Great.
But so but the yeah, so the sexual grief effect, if I do when I do this deeper dive, is we can look at, yes, the sexually traumatic predatory events that occur.
Mm.
And when working with a new mother, sometimes what comes up is an unexpected memory of a predatory event that may have been hidden.
Mm.
And it's not as a result of, and will always bring this up when we're talking on this topic. Um, it's not because the hormones are flooding through her body. It's because perhaps something, if it was a vaginal birth, that happened during that vaginal birth, that is triggering,
Mm.
that is agitating,
Mm.
and all of a sudden a memory begins to pop in.
Mm.
And I call them pop-up memories.
Mm.
Rather than trigger. I'm really trying to veer away from the word of trigger. So
Mm.
there is, a predatory memory that can come up that is she's beside herself. But she realizes, and I get chills every time I talk about it, and there is sexual grief there.
Mm.
And what does sexual grief do? It affects one's ability to feel like to feel that they can be sexual, to feel that they are worthy. There's a lot of disgust or shame. And so if this is a new memory, then this new mother is also then dealing with aspects of shame or disgust,
Mm.
or some self-loathing. And
Yeah.
that loathing piece is a big part of my sexual grief effect conversation. And what I talk about is we go from loathing to liberation, because you begin to find that liberation when you open up to, okay, I'm going to be curious about this, not shut it down.
Mm.
Developmentally, it can be that all of a sudden this mother, as she's loving on this new baby, starts to realize, oh my God, I had a developmental experience. And this, as clinicians, we can certainly look at the developmental timeline. What do you think was going on in utero when you were in utero with your mom? And were you wanted? And what was your first sexual experience like? Because if you know some of the hormonal stuff is being ruled out or ruled in, there may also be this developmental piece of having been unwanted. And now, as you are loving this child, the new mother may feel, I don't know what to do. I feel at a loss.
Yeah.
And that is also the sexual grief effect.
Yeah. No, thank you. I know we had Anne Weinstein on quite a while back. I don't know if you've read her book, but she talks a little bit about that, how pregnancy can trigger these kind of old memories as
Yes.
well. And I
Yes.
think she also pointed out that it's sort of, I know there's been some bit of research on this, that, most women won't tell their therapist about that. They won't,
No,
they won't open up about it, which is really
no,
sad.
no. And that is actually the this is a much deeper dive, but that's part of the hide and seek. That's part of what's hidden in the labyrinth, if you will. And so it's the idea of, okay, so let's do some exploration here. And I don't know that how much I'm going to be able to cover going forward in terms of the languaging I use is, they feel like they're being held hostage, and then I actually teach hostage negotiation strategies as part of the liberation. And that first strategy is curiosity. And it's the last thing that they want to go into. And so asking the right questions, helping the psyche feel safe enough to explore will give the clinician inroads to this part of a history that is very well hidden, secreted away within mm, the mind, brain, body, and soul of the
Yeah,
woman who is before you.
yeah. No, thank you. So
Thank
this
you.
this topic, obviously, it's it's great we're talking about it, but generally speaking, as you said, families, mums don't talk about it, and it's pretty of a taboo subject. So I'm just wondering how we can, nurture a more sensitive understanding, really, an attitude towards this whole thing for mums and dads to a certain extent as well.
Well, it's in partnerships, it's not that the mom is not just sharing it with the therapist, with the clinician,
Um,
she's not sharing it with her partner either,
yeah.
right? So often, or there will be something that is a, um, a point, a nodal point in this woman's life where she doesn't have memory, or where there are no-go zones sexually. And so to ask, how do you protect yourself? Have you ever felt like saying no sexually? I work a lot with the idea of helping someone create a mask. It can be done, you don't have to be creative, but and I will talk about this. You just draw a circle, on a piece of paper, and write down all of the emotions that you feel about yourself as you became a sexual being.
Mm,
And there may be great information there. And
mm,
then you can just go in. And it becomes a safe platform that can be added to the piece of paper, can be torn up. It can
mm,
be reinvented and reimagined. And you can watch, and if loathing is part of the conversation, and I will offer up words, is there some kind of loathing at times around a body part?
mm,
Oh, okay, let's go there. Or what body part needs more of your compassion,
mm,
and go there. So there's a lot of ways, and depending, every client is different, every clinician is different. There's no one right or wrong way. It's an invitation, and I trust that as clinicians, you will find the right way in depending on what you map in
mm,
your client.
mm. Beautiful. Thank you. I know as a dad, I've got two boys, and it's like they say that nothing can prepare you for parenthood, right? There's this, it's like,
Right.
and I'm sure I know it's much more extreme for us, but how do you think we can help women, particularly, kind of prepare in some? Is there some way we could do this better? Do you think preparing women for these massive changes that happen?
Hmm. It's such a great question, because as much as we want to believe that we can prepare, there's always the part we can't prepare for,
Hmm.
you know?
Hmm.
And and so we can certainly work with, what do they imagine life will be like
Hmm.
with a baby? We can help them imagine how to hold on to parts of themselves, to put supports in place. And not everybody has the money to have a nanny or to, have daycare, although I think that your system is vastly different than ours, and perhaps there is, daycare that is available. And so if there is daycare, to be able to say, how can you take a moment out of your day to think about what your needs are, and to actually make that as part of a ritual, even when you don't think that that's what you're going to need, you
Mm,
know, and community. What we know about mental health is community is essential. So what are the kinds of groups that you might be able to join, or family members who can offer support, or dinners that you can share once a week with friends, with a group of like-minded people, with members of your church, so that you can absolutely not have to be in it alone, because it is the loneliness factor. It is that sense of alienation and not having anyone to share who you are natally within yourself
mm,
that can inform this sense of that child bind, the separation between the self and the child and the loss of self.
mm. Wonderful. So I know, yes, you're running a course for us starting on the 1st of February. And we our audience is mostly practitioners, and they are, the idea of the course I know is to give some clues about how we can support particularly mums going through these kind of transitions. Could you just say a little bit about what the three-part course will cover, Edie? Would that be okay?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
I can give you the
So
titles for them if that would be.
yeah, that would be really helpful, because
Yeah.
I sorry about that.
No,
It's
that's kind of put you on
you
the spot
know,
there. So on the first class on the 1st of February, it's about personal and social identity, identifying the distinction between the desire to bond with the newborn and fusing one's own self with the child, and how the
That's
pattern.
good. That's
Yeah, is that
that's
enough?
yeah,
Yeah.
that's perfect. So I'm a big believer in and I follow the work of Murray Bowen, and Murray Bowen wrote a lot about the family and differentiation and fusion, and really what I think is important is that we often think that we must fuse with the child and fuse with our family members, and fusion is often like it looks like closeness and it looks like love. But if we are really fused, then in a way can look like this. And fusion is not the goal. It really, the goal as we bond with our child and we bond within our families, is to be able to bond, but also hold on to the self and
Mm,
not lose the self.
mm,
And so when we're working with a mother, it's like, if you are with that child all of the time and you do not take time for yourself, you're not helping yourself, and you're really not teaching the child how to self-soothe, how
mhm,
to comfort. And it is very uncomfortable. It's very, very uncomfortable to allow the child to learn how to self-soothe, and to be there while perhaps you're teaching that child, but you're also teaching yourself how to self-soothe. So one's personal identity grows, and what we're doing is we're helping the mother see that as she allows the child to learn self-soothing, she is also learning self-soothing. And so the byproduct of the growth of personal identity and differentiation is, as she's allowing that child to become differentiated and breaking away from some of the fusion tactics that we as clinicians can help them identify,
mm,
then it's not a loss of self. It is actually an infusion of the self.
Beautiful. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Hmm.
So I know the second class is around grief and what you call the 11 phases of grief. 11 phases.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's all I need. So the 11 phases of grief are actually in my book, It's Grief, the Dance of Self-Discovery Through Trauma and Loss. And I talk about 11 phases rather than stages. Stages were really written by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and she intended initially for those stages to be for the dying, not for the people who were grieving.
Mhm.
And it's often misinterpreted that her 5 stages, and yes, those 5 stages have been now converted to 6 stages and have been developed for people who are grieving. But I really felt that even those 6 stages, that there are really phases and they are non-linear. They don't follow any one path.
Mm.
And we think, oh, well, we're first going to do this, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to be done. And it just doesn't work that way. And so to understand and help the mother realize that she is going through a grieving process, and that loss of self and the bind of that is understanding that maybe she's going to go through anger or rage, or maybe she's going to feel anxiety and despair, and that she may actually feel all of these together, and that there's a forgiveness piece. And
Mm.
what is forgiveness? It's not about forgetting, it's about learning how to remember in a more peaceful, graceful way. And it's getting to grace, meaning you're not going to forget that you've been going through this kind of loss of self, but you're also meeting and invigorating a new self, and you're developing a new personal and probably social identity as well, because that social identity is who your social life is organized around, and the organization of that social life can greatly change. It changes when you marry, often. It
Mm.
changes when you have a child. It changes as that child grows and is involved in different sports. So your organization of your social identity will also change along the way as you also develop the personal identity,
Mm.
and that it is ever evolving.
Mm. Brilliant. Thank you. Beautiful. And
Mm.
the last thing, Edie, is around breaking the bind and honoring the core self while honoring
Mhm.
the needs of the infant.
So it's really what I addressed earlier on, which is, okay, well, what are the things about your life pre-baby that you loved, that you enjoyed? So I'm a potter. So,
Mm.
so I had to make sure that I got my hands in clay,
Mm.
because I realized that if I didn't do that, that I was not going to be centered or balanced within myself. But nobody told me it was okay. So
Mm.
I felt like I was doing something wrong if I went and I played with clay.
Mm.
And so it was truly a need and a desire on my part. And I felt like, oh, I'm wrong. I'm wrong. I'm wrong. And no, there was nothing wrong with that. And it was very interesting once somebody said, "You've got permission to do this.
Mm.
You've got the permission to do this."
Mm.
That then, you know, it's like my pieces when I thought I was wrong were horrible. I mean, I couldn't throw they were collapsing, and they were really mirroring the way that I was feeling. And then once I was given permission, it was amazing. All of a sudden, like they were standing straight. And so it's like what mirrors our own loss or of self, and what mirrors our stability and our enhanced sense of self. And it's we narcissism sometimes has a really bad bad rap. But
But
sometimes as new mothers, we need to find our narcissism. We need to find our internal, it's okay to have points of pleasure that belong to us.
yeah, beautiful. Yeah, Jackie is saying hers is cooking.
Cooking. Thank you, Jackie. Yeah. Yeah.
Brilliant. Oh, thank you so much, Edie. That was beautiful. So, just a reminder then that Edie's course starts on Thursday the 1st, so 1st and 8th and 15th of February at 7 p.m. And you can get all our details at ourbirthjourney.com. So I'm really looking forward to it, Edie. It's
I
beautiful.
am too. Thank you everyone for being here, for staying on. You know, it's late in your day, and I really appreciate all of your time. Thank you so very much.
Thanks, Edy. Thanks, everybody.
Mhm.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye bye. Nice to see you. Bye bye.
See you.